Hi, my name is Kim and you're welcome to Kyimya'yaih Fashion. And today's video I'm going to be showing you how to draft a 6-panel straight corset. It's just going to be a pattern making tutorial, reason being that I already have a whole pattern making and sewing tutorial on an underbust corset. I'll be dropping the link in the description box below, and you can just watch that video and apply the same process for the cutting and fabric preparation and sewing. So you can basically use the same process for that. However, this pattern is one with the zipper at the back, so if you want to use eyelets, you can just do that by watching the underbust corset video. It has the process for that also. And I'll also be using my basic bodice block, the one with the bust dart. If you don't know how to draft a basic bodice block with either a shoulder dart or a bust dart, then you can just watch the video. I'll be dropping a link in the description box. Also, you can also watch the video and then learn. You just draft your basic block and then you can use that. You can use the block to draft your corset pattern. Also, I'd like to thank you so much to our new subscribers. Thank you. You are the best. Thank you for those that have subscribed. Thank you for those that are just subscribing. You guys are awesome. Honestly, you guys are awesome. I hope that you're learning something. If you have any questions, you can just drop them in the link below. If you have any comments, please make sure, don't be afraid to drop any comments. Just drop the comments, preferably good comments, preferably questions, preferably encouraging comments. Yes, thank you for sticking around. Let's get into the pattern drafting. So the measurements we'll be needing, aside from having your block, we'll be needing your bust circumference, your underbust circumference, your waist circumference, your underbust length, your bust point, your apex to apex, and also your hip circumference. These are the measurements that we'll be using for our corset. So starting up, I'm going to be tracing out my block. This time around, I'm going to be pivoting my bust dart to my shoulder. As you can see, there's already a mark. I've divided my shoulder by 2, and I'm going to be pivoting my bust dart to that point. In case you haven't pivoted a dart before, you can just watch carefully as I do that. So I start by tracing out the points that are going to be stagnant, the points I'm not moving, which is from the point on the shoulder to my neck that I'm not going to touch, and then the bottom part of my block, I'll be passing a pin through my bust point, and then using that point I'm going to pivot the bust dart, so like this. So basically that's it, just pivot it and then continue tracing to the point that I've already marked also on the shoulder. So after tracing out my block, I'm going to be drawing lines from the shoulder down to the bust point so that I can just have lines that will show clearly where my shoulder dart is now. And then I'm going to also be extending my block down to my hip line. I've just measured 9 inches for my hip level, and then I'm going to draw a square line at that point. On the hip line, I'm going to be marking my quarter waist measurement plus a little bit of ease, and the ease that I usually use is 0.25, so a quarter measurement, a quarter of my waist circumference plus 0.25, and then from that point I'm going to connecting my bust to my hip with a straight line. I'm also going to be extending my waistline like so. Next, I'm going to be marking my underbust point, and I'm going to be squaring. I'm going to be drawing a square line at the underbust point, and of course at my bust point also. I'm also going to be marking my apex divided by 2 on the waistline, and I'm just going to be connecting my bust point to my hip line with a straight line. Next thing I'm going to do is to apply my shoulder reduction by 200%. So I'm basically drawing lines from the bust point through my shoulder tip and my neck point. The reason for this is so that I would have a very nice fit to the chest line when the corset is done. What I've done right now is to divide the remaining section of my block by 2. This is because I'm going to be making a 6 panel corset, and for the front is going to have 3 panels as well as the back. So I've divided the other part of my block by 2 so that I can have a line that will create 3 panels in all. Now, before I start to make any adjustments for my waist, I'm going to be subtracting my actual waist measurement, which is 28 inches. I'm going to be subtracting 2 inches from that. So the waist measurement I'm going to be using is 26 inches. I'm then going to divide 26 by 4, and what I have is what I'm going to be using to create the darts on these 2 lines that I have. I'm going to be applying a waist reduction method where I'm going to just be reducing at different points on my waist. First, I'm going to start with the side seam. So I'm going to be reducing 1/2 inch from my side seam, and then that 1/2 inch I'm going to just connect down to my hip, and then I'm also going to connect it up to my bust line. Next, I'm going to be reducing 1/2 inch again from my center front. This means that I'm going to have a center front. I'm going to have a line on my center front. So the same 1/2 inch I'm going to mark on my hip, and I'll just connect from the waist to the hip with a straight line, and then I'm going to also draw a line from the waist up to my bust point line, sorry. Now that I've done all of this, I'm going to measure from my new center front line to my new side seam line, and what I have is 9 inches. So I'm going to be subtracting 1/4 of 26, which is 6.5, from 9 inches, and if I do that, I'm going to have 2.5. Now 2.5 is what I'm going to be using for my darts. I'll then divide 2.5 by 2 again, and what I have is 1.25. I am also going to, so 1.25 is what I'm going to be placing on each of these lines. I'm going to have 1.25 on one line, 1.25 on the other line, and with darts, you know that the 1.25 is what I'm going to divide. So if I divide 1.25 by 2, I have 0.625. So I'm going to be placing 0.625 on each side of each of these 2 dart lines. So what I'm doing now basically is just using my tape to divide my 1.25. I'm just basically using my tape to do that division so that I can have an exact measurement on my tape, and I'm going to be marking 0.625 on each side of the dart lines, and then I'll just connect them to the end of my end of the dart line, which is at the hip line, with straight lines to just create my dart. Next, I'm going to also apply the same dart reduction on my underbust line. I'm going to be using the same process that I used on my waist. So the the measurement I have is also still 9 inches on the pattern for my underbust, and my underbust, cut out my underbust is 7.25. so if you subtract 7.25 from 9, you're going to have 1.75, and then if you divide that by 2, you're going to have 0.875. so 0.875 is what I'm going to be using to create my darts points on my underbust line. So 0.875 divided by 2 is, well, I'm not going to be using 0.875 divided by 2 for each. What I'm going to be doing for my bust line is, on the line that is towards the side seam, I'm going to be applying the 0.75 on that line, and then on the line that is by the bust point, that is the dashed line of the bust point, I'm going to be applying the 1 inch. So that line is going to have 0.5 inches on each side of it, and then the second line is going to just have 0.375. so I'm going to be using that to connect to my waistline, and then using curves, I'm just going to be connecting with curves to the bust point line. So make sure that the curved lines on the second dart line are not as curvy as the curved lines for the first dart line, which is the dart line that's going to be at your apex point, at your bust point. This is so that you don't have like a weird fit. You don't have like excess boob space at the side of your boob. So next, I'm creating my neckline. So my neckline, I want something that isn't too exposing, so I'm just going to, from my shoulder point, I'm just going to mark 8 inches. 8 inches is going to be the depth of my neckline, and then from the 8 inches I'm just going to curve to 7 inches. So 7 inches is going to be the highest point on my bust line. Now remember that we have a line, and we have two lines, two panel lines that we have for our corset, and I just went ahead to complete my neckline. Just for the moment, just putting aside that I have a large dart space on only one of the points. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to measure this entire space of the dart. I'm going to measure it like so, and after measuring it, what I have, I am going to take that measurement. I think I had about 3.5 inches. So what I'm going to do with that 3.5 inches is this: I'm going to use 1.5 inch on the second line for my panel, and the 2.5 inches I'm going to use to make the following adjustment on the first line for my panels. So what I did was, the 1.5 I divided by 2, I have 0.25, and along the neckline I marked 0.75 on that line. And then for this second panel line, I have 2.5, so I divided 2.5 by 2, and what I had was 1.25. so 1.25 I'm going to be marking on both sides of the line. I made sure that I extended the whole line through, and then I'm going to be marking 1.25 on both sides of that line. And then, as you can see, I used curves. I'm going to be using curves to connect it back down to my apex point. For the first panel line, you can also decide not to just divide your 2.5 by 2. You can decide that you want to use 1 inch towards one side and then 1.5 inch towards the other. So that's what I ended up doing. I used 1.5 inch towards the front and then 1 inch towards the side, and then connected it down with curved lines to my apex points. Now I'm going to make sure that I balance out my points, so I'm measuring from the neckline point down to the apex point. What I have, I'm going to make sure that it balances with the second panel, and then from that point I'm going to complete the line to the second panel, like so, and then I'll still use my tape and measure from that point on the neckline of the second panel to the apex point, and I'm going to make sure that that also matches to the neckline point on the third panel. If it doesn't, I'm just going to extend my line, and then I would make sure that it meets up with the third panel. So after doing that, I'm just going to adjust my neckline curve on the third panel towards the side seam. So before I call it a day on the front of my pattern, I am going to make sure that I mark all my pieces. I have three panels, so I have to make sure that I mark each and every one of them, and I'm going to just make this final adjustment of just completing that curve from the center front, just making it more clear for you to see. And I'm just basically just going to make sure that my lines are a bit more clear for you to see. Then I'm going to have my grain lines drawn on each panel piece. I'm going to be marking each piece 1, 2, 3. So 1 being my center front, the second being the second panel, and then the third being the third panel. Now before I call it a day on my pattern, I'm going to be creating a hemline. This is by choice. You can decide that you want your corset to reach all the way to your hip line, that's fine, but I'm just going to be creating a hemline. So I'm going to be marking on this side 4 inches on my side seam, and then on my center front I'm going to be marking 6 inches. I'm going to be finishing this off with a really nice inward curve. This is because I want it to look that way. You can choose to make it a curve towards a different direction. You can just make it a straight line. You can just make it like a V. You can just make a V because you want to attach it to a dress. Whatever your preference is, you can just do that, and it's perfectly fine. And that's it for the front of our corset pattern. Next up, we'll be drafting the back of our pattern.